Talk to me about some of the bullying tactics that CCO experienced near the end of the campaign. Tell me where we're at now with the Cap the Rate initiative specifically, and then what are some of the other economic reforms that CCO is looking at?
And I may flip the last two, is that all right?
Sure.
Cool. And I look at you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, the payday lending industry knew that as soon as our initiative to cap interest rates on payday loans was on the ballot, it was going to win. It was going to just overwhelmingly pass in the state of Missouri because folks know that 400% interest rates are wrong. And so they tried every tactic they could to keep us from getting on the ballot. And when we were out gathering signatures in the field, they hired bullies and thugs to stand on the streets and scream at our volunteer petitioner gatherers. Actually, Mother Susan McCann, who's one of our clergy leaders from Liberty, talks about standing in front of the public library in Springfield, going down there to gather signatures one day, and having a man scream, "Liar, liar, liar," right in her face, and just trying to intimidate her and make her leave the site. We saw fake dummy petitions out in the field that they were using to try to confuse voters. And we saw some really harassment-oriented tactics that actually culminated with 5,500 signatures being stolen out of a car in Springfield a week before the signatures were due. So what's wonderful is despite all of those bullying and harassment-oriented tactics, the payday lending industry wasn't able to keep us from gathering twice as many signatures as we needed to get on the ballot. We gathered over 180,000 signatures statewide. So actually, the night that you all filmed us here at this church celebrating the signatures we had gathered, we found out a couple of hours before that event that an organizer's car down in Springfield had been broken into, and that 5,500 volunteer signatures had been stolen. The window had been broken while he was inside of a building for less than 5 minutes. And though his checkbook was left on the seat, 5,500 volunteer signatures had been stolen. And that represented about a month's worth of grassroots organizing work to gather those 5,500 signatures. And they were due in a week. And so within 24 hours, though, after this action, when all of our leadership had been there having this event and expended a lot of energy, we filled over 70 volunteer shifts to go down to Springfield in the heat of the beginning of summer to gather those signatures back. And folks worked 14-hour days. They went door to door. They wore their shoe level to the bones. And they were screamed at in front of public libraries and called liars. And we got about 750,000, I'm screwing that up. And we got 7,500 signatures back in about 4 days after 5,500 had been stolen. So every time they went up against us in the field with our volunteer and our grassroots power, they couldn't match it. There were too many people in the state who cared about what we were doing. What we didn't anticipate was the way in which the payday lending industry could manipulate the courts and could block us through the legal processes. So though we weren't on the ballot in 2012, we know that there are over 180,000 people in this state who have already made clear that they want a chance to vote on a cap on payday loan interest rates. We know that there are thousands of volunteers that can be mobilized at a moment's notice to go gather more signatures. And we know that the vast majority of Missourians want to see this passed. And so for us, right now, we know that the fight to cap interest rates on payday loans is far from over. And we know that people will keep fighting until it's won. Maybe in 2014, maybe in 2016, but we know that Missourians will have on the ballot the chance to say yes. 400% interest is too high, and it's time to cap the rate on payday loans. And we know that that will all come from a groundswell of grassroots people making it happen. And then this work to cap interest rates on payday loans is part of a much larger movement for economic dignity here in the state of Missouri. So as much as charging triple-digit interest rates is absolutely unconscionable, and these predatory actors need to be stopped, we also know that people take out payday loans because they don't have enough money to begin with. Because folks are working full-time in this city every single day, and they're making poverty wages. You can work 40 hours a week at minimum wage and still not have enough money in your pocket to feed your kids. You can work 60 hours a week at minimum wage, like a lot of our families do, and still not be able to make it from paycheck to paycheck without a predatory product like a payday loan. And that is wrong. And so while we continue the work to cap interest rates on payday loans, we're also clear that people should also be able to work with dignity. And that's why people of faith have been mobilizing to stand on the front lines with fast food workers in their campaign and their movement for higher wages and the right to organize, and why we're continuing to stand up for things like medical insurance through Medicaid expansion that'll make it a little bit easier to get from one paycheck to the next and to actually be able to go to the doctor when you're sick as a working parent. Right now, poverty in Missouri is a burden that folks have to weather just by virtue of where they were born. And any mentalities we have about just working hard and playing by the rules just doesn't work when minimum wage keeps you in poverty. Working 2 jobs at minimum wage keeps you in poverty. And we're clear that the whole vision of our movement for economic dignity cannot be met until not only are 400% interest rates outlawed, but hardworking families should be able to make it from paycheck to paycheck without getting suckered into a bad loan and without having to worry about how they feed their kids. And we're in it for that long haul vision.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
That's it.
I get you? Cool.
You got it.
Rock on.
That was perfect.